My name is Miles Willis. The Navy came to our school. I grew up in Smyrna. The Navy came to our school giving the Navy V-12 test, which I made. So I joined and was sworn into the Navy in April of 1944. I graduated from high school in May, was called to active service on July 1 of 1944 and served until June 20th of 1946. As I say, I went into the Navy in the V-12 program at Newberry College in South Carolina. I wasn't ready to go to college. I wanted to play football, and they had a football team. And so I gave more attention to that. I flunked physics lab and made a low grade in something else, and they sent a whole crowd of us to Great Lakes, to boot camp. We had an abbreviated 9-week session at Great Lakes. Then I was assigned to diesel school, learning to repair diesel engines for LCVPs down at Gulfport, Mississippi. From there to amphibious training at Little Creek, Virginia. And when that was finished, I was assigned to LSM 306. And we left Norfolk, Virginia on May the 8th, 1945. Went down through the canal up the west coast, and spent about 10 days, 2 weeks at Long Beach, California. That they were preparing the ship for overseas. And then we went to San Francisco and Oakland, and from there they loaded us up cargo, and we went to Pearl Harbor for about a week, and then to Guam, and from Guam to Saipan. And we were in Saipan Harbor for about a month. Just an open harbor with Saipan and Tinian formed a harbor there, and it was just amphibious ships as far as you could see. Yeah, I was in the engine room crew. I was a throttle man. The LSM was powered by 2 16-cylinder diesel engines, and I was a throttle man on the port side, and of course did whatever other work was in the engine room. Yeah, I was below deck all the time. We did. At night, especially if we had duty, you just had to check gauges and all every hour and record them. So we'd go up on deck and we could watch the B-29s coming back from their bombing run, because out on the Saipan Tinian, it kind of formed a wide V, I guess you could say, and that's where the harbor was. So we could see the planes taking off and coming back into Tinian. Yeah, we watched that at night. We were there when they dropped the atom bomb, the 2, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We got it over the Armed Forces radio almost immediately. Yeah, we knew it, almost immediately afterwards. And immediately after that, we were sent to the Philippines, and we operated in and out of the Philippines until we came home in May of 1946. We had one trip to Okinawa just after the end of the war. And then we were went to the smaller island of Kyushu, Japan, place called, close to Nagasaki. In fact, we were scheduled to go to Nagasaki, but they hadn't finished clearing the mines out. And also went to a place called Sasebo and delivered an Army unit there. Of course, an LSM not large enough to carry a whole unit, so we traveled with other ships like our sister ships 307 and 309 most of the time. So we were at Sasebo for about 10 days and then back to the Philippines. And again, the last large assignment we had in the Philippines was on Luzon. There was an Army unit up on the north, very north of Luzon, and to get out of there, they had to drive through the mountains to get down to Lingayen Gulf, where we were operating. And the mountains were still had a lot of Japanese soldiers up there that didn't know the war was over and all. And of course the roads there were narrow, mostly dirt roads, and it would have been very dangerous for them to drive out of there. So we, along with our sister ships, made I think it was 11 voyages from the Lingayen Gulf area on Luzon up to Apari, where this Army unit was, and hauled them out down to Lingayen Gulf. And we operated just among the islands in the Philippines after that. I said there until we returned from there. We went to Guam, stopped there, Pearl Harbor for about a week, and then came back to Port Hueneme, California. And I had enough points for discharge, so I got off the ship at Port Hueneme and came cross country by train from Los Angeles to New Orleans and changed trains there and went through Mobile and across South Georgia and Florida to Jacksonville and got my discharge at Jacksonville Naval Air Station. Yes, I grew up in Smyrna, and in 1941 I was working part-time for Lander's Drug Store, which was right there at the only traffic light in Smyrna at that time. And back then the Dr. Landers opened on Sunday morning and for a little while, and then closed for church services, and then we reopened at 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. And I had just gone to work, cleaning up the soda fountain and doing, the usual work for Sunday afternoon. And we heard the news on the radio. And of course, everybody was asking, where is Pearl Harbor? But that's where we were. And of course, people started gathering, and there was a lot of discussion, a lot of talk. And of course, great concern, because so many people in the area had already gone in service before that. Of course, being on an amphibious ship, we were stuck way back in the back end of the harbor. But yeah, it was pretty well cleaned up, but of course you could still see the Arizona and they had not done the memorial. It was still there, and some others. And we were close to Ford Island, so you could see still some of the damage back in that area, but not much. It was pretty well cleaned up. Like I say, we were there for about a month, and with all the information that we were getting from Armed Forces Radio and things of that type, everybody was expecting the war to be over. They, at one time, while we were there, we went in and were loaded with equipment to go to Okinawa. But then we pulled back out and anchored for a day or two, and they sent us over to Guam and unloaded us, and then sent us back to Saipan to wait. I'm sure the authorities knew a lot more about what was happening than we did, and we were expecting to be in the invasion of Japan. I mean, that obviously was what the fleet was there for. But fortunately, when we got the news of the surrender, we did have a big celebration. We had a big celebration because it was such a relief knowing that it would not be an invasion of Japan. I didn't go to the Big Island, but in the where we did go to Sasebo, we got to go ashore, you know, and it was a small town, large port. It just, you came up on it, it looked like a little river coming out into the ocean or something. You go through the mountains on each side, and it opens up into a huge port. The small town there was in a rectangular form, long, so forth. And there was a cemetery up at the end of it, up on the hill. There was one building left standing in that town. I mean, it was maybe a mile long. I mean, the town. And it had been, it was absolutely destroyed. And by the time we were there on October 1. The war ended middle of August. We were there on October 1. And that rubble had been piled up, scraped out. The town was just flat. One building standing had been apparently a government building of some type, but it was stucco on the outside, and it was cracked and damaged. But the thing that impressed us is that cemetery right at the end of it, up on the hill, was not touched. They had bombed that town and totally destroyed it, but had not damaged the cemetery at all. Several of us took the little boat that we only had a small boat with an outboard motor to go pick up our mail or something like that. So we took that and went to a hill back there that was very steep, had a road around it. And we went back to explore, and there were caves back in there that had complete machine shops. One would have lathes or something, the others would, you go a little further, there was another one that had different kinds of machines all the way around that. There was no way you could see it from the air, or, you know. But they had complete machine shops, and the last one was full of large shells like that, all the way around it. It was amazing. Up in the upper end of the harbor, they were building two-man submarines, you know, those small mini subs, and they had camouflage cover over it. But they were building them, and they could roll them down on a railroad track, like down into the harbor, and take them out. But it was amazing what they were doing, and what we would have run into had there been an invasion. Yeah, the death rate would have been extremely high. It really would, because, you know, from all the information we had heard, they didn't surrender. I mean, it was a fight to the end. We knew the casualty rate would be very high, but we didn't dwell on it. You know, you just didn't dwell on it. If it happened, it would happen, and I figured there were two areas on the LSM that were very vulnerable. Of course, the conning tower was on the starboard side, and if the ship was controlled there. That's where the officers were and so forth. And over the bow doors, we had a twin 20 millimeter, twin 20s anyhow. And my best friend, I got to know on the ship. He was on it when I was transferred there. I grew up in Little Five Points in Atlanta. And it took two people to fire that gun. He was on the right side and I was on the left side. And it was the only large gun on there. So the two vulnerable places would be that gun and the conning tower, and we knew that. The Filipinos were very friendly, and no, we enjoyed our time. We were in Manila twice, and being on an amphibious ship like that, it was at least our ship, and I think most of them were very relaxed. When we were at Sasebo, one day my friends and I caught a ride on an army truck and went inland about 10 miles or so, little village, just small village, and got off, and we just wanted to get away from the harbor and see what it was like. We found two little Japanese boys that, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, something like that. Typical caps and glasses. If you had to, I think it's what you would think is a typical Japanese boy from what we'd seen. And these kids couldn't understand a word we were saying or anything, but we were able to with sign language and all, they followed us everywhere we went in that little town. And they would show us things. But somebody decided, one of our guys decided he'd like to have a Japanese flag. And he was able to tell them, and they took us where he could get one. Yeah, I thought I'd like to have a Japanese flag, and so I got the message to them, and they took me to this house. An elderly lady came to the door, and they told her what I was looking for. And she had one. It's about that long, I offered her $20 for it. And she's, no. And so she gave me the sign, smoke. So through language, and these boys talking to her, I got her promise to hold it till the next day, then I would come back. And what she wanted was a carton of cigarettes. So I went back the next day and took her one carton of Raleigh cigarettes and got that flag. I'd offered her $20 for it. But she could make more money on the black market with that. We went ashore one day, and you had to go down. We were walking down the street at the end of the harbor, and there was some little Japanese boys, little fellows, 4, 5, 6 years old, playing. And there was a Marine sitting on a wall there with them and so forth. And as we walked by, and we got a few feet beyond them, one of them yelled out, "Hey, Swabby!" And I thought, this Marine has already taught those little Japanese kids to call sailors swabbies. After the war, of course, during the war, our address was Fleet Post Office, San Francisco. After the war, our mail was not censored anymore. And so we could write and tell them. I could tell my mother where it was and everything. And she would send me addresses of some of my friends that had joined since after I did, and were over there. One letter I got, I was reading it and the address, and I went up in the con and checked. And that's that camp right over there. I could see it, but I couldn't go. I didn't get to go over there. I got a letter from her just before we went to Okinawa. And moved an Army unit from Luzon, in fact, to Okinawa. And my stepbrother, who was in the Marines and in the invasion of Okinawa, was still stationed there. So when we unloaded, I got off, and another fellow went with me, and we hitchhiked all over Okinawa looking for my stepbrother. And finally, late in the afternoon, we found him. Then he went back with us. We hitchhiked back to where our ship had been, but they were expecting a storm, and it had pulled out and anchored. It was after dark, and they wouldn't come pick us up, of course. But there had been a typhoon there a week or so before, and had washed an LCI up on the beach, and they had a garden. They let us sleep on it. And the next day we went out on our ship, and he had, it happened to be a Sunday, and he said he had the first hot meal he'd had in a long time. He ate lunch with us. The railroad, my stepfather worked for the NC and St. L Railroad, and they printed a little booklet periodically. And they ran a thing of about he and his sons, and with our pictures and all that. I've got a copy of it. But so we had Army, Coast Guards, Marines, and the Navy. The Army guy went to Europe. He was in England for a long time. He was not in the actual fighting. He was in the medical corps. But he was in Europe before the Germans surrendered. The Coast Guard, he spent his career at Staten Island, New York, except early in the war, they put him on a cargo ship, and he was in the invasion of North Africa. Then the Marine was in the invasion of Okinawa. He went through the Okinawa whole thing. And I was the only one that didn't get into any kind of action. But all of us came back unscratched. And you mentioned about coming home. I got home on June 20th of 1946. My oldest stepbrother was stationed in Atlanta and was living with us. The one in the Marines had come home about a month or two before I did, and he was, of course, there. The Coast Guard, he got his discharge. He had married while he was in service. He married a girl from Seattle, Washington, who was also in the Coast Guard and was stationed where he was, and that's how they met. But he was going back out there to live. But he came home to see his dad and see us visit some. I walked from there over to Marietta Street, to 101 building, Marietta Street, which is right at Spring Street, and waited for the trolley. Back then we still had the trolleys running from Atlanta to Marietta, and rode the trolley home. And we lived on Fleming Street, which is the south end of what is Belmont Hills now. And I got off there and walked home, and my family greeted me. My closest friend was a fellow named Dale Bledsoe, who grew up in Little Five Points area of Atlanta, but he's deceased. I had some good. It was an unusual group, but they had a foursome that went on Liberty together all the time. It was him. We called him Stretch because he was about 6'3". And a boy named Tommy Oglesby from Bronx, New York, and Charlie Schultz from Brooklyn, New York. Kind of a strange group, but we happened to be good friends and went on Liberty together all the time while we were on the ship. But no, I lost contact with all of them. Well, you know, I don't ever really remember being really scared about it, because like I say, you just didn't. We were there, and if we were involved in, like when they loaded us to go to Okinawa, the fighting was still going strong, but you didn't hear anybody worried about it. I mean, we're going to Okinawa. It was just, I'm sure we were all scared some, but it was just what we were supposed to do. After I came home, like I say, I didn't see any action. It was like a vacation for me. I thoroughly enjoyed the time I was in the Navy and on the ship and all. It was a great experience. But after I came home, I served as a pallbearer for 3 friends, 2 Army and 1 Marine that lost their lives. So at Veterans Day, I think about that. I think about those people that gave it all, you know. And I was very fortunate. I was blessed. I was blessed because I could have been there. They were my age, but a couple of them quit school and went in the Army. But that's what I think about. I really do.